Hello and welcome to the Elephant Lounge. I'm your host Tuesday, and I want to thank you so much for joining me. And we are back for the second episode of Why Are They Guilty? Now, in the first episode, I talked to you about
asked, and at no time has any sexual contact ever occurred between you and Mr. Jackson, right? Do you see that?
Yes.
And your answer was never, correct?
Yes.
And you now claim that that was a lie, correct?
That was not the truth.
That's why you always.
the first section of this is the black and white fallacy. So we're presented with these ideas that Wade has changed his story about testifying or not testifying. It's all black and white. You'll notice they present it must be this or it must be this. There are indeed either or situations. Okay, those do exist. But whenever we see these types of arguments being made, it's up to us to check and see if that's actually true. Child sexual abuse is complicated. It's messy. It's very easy to understand the confusion for a child. Is this wrong? It's wrong, but it's okay. It's not okay, but I'm okay. It's bad, but he was my friend. We loved each other. I loved him. I didn't say no, so it's my fault. A lot of these children, they didn't put up a resistance. They went along with it. So when they look back years later, they don't see it as anything wrong because they didn't put up a resistance. They will feel guilt. They will feel shame over what happened. And then it doesn't help when they also know, in this case, we're dealing with Michael Jackson, they also know that a whole bunch of people are going to be calling them liars and attacking them, telling them that they're not being truthful. These are all extreme elements of stress that is placed upon the victim. So to suggest that, well, he said he had this dinner, but the family says that the dinner occurred afterward. Okay, listen, even if I give the benefit of the doubt to the Jacksons, let's say, you're putting one person's word up against another person's word. And quite frankly, if we look at the totality of the situation, the Jacksons are not in a position to really be believed. But let's say we don't like Wade and we don't like the Jacksons. One person's word is against another person's word. It's he said, he said. There's no slam dunk here. So there's no argument to really be made. Wade and his wife say this dinner happened before the trial. The family says no. That doesn't prove anything. There's no slam dunk here. At worst we can say is that they cancel each other out. Or at best we could say is that they cancel each other out. Period. Again, we just have to keep in mind that many things are not mutually exclusive. We want to make an earnest attempt to examine if it does or does not apply, meaning if somebody makes a black and white argument and they're suggesting to you, no, it must be this or it has to be this, it can't be true at the same time, let's look honestly at the situation and think to ourselves, well, wait a minute, is it really an either or situation? When it comes to propaganda, it almost never is. There are many situations that can be true at the same time. They are not mutually exclusive. We also have to ask ourselves, does this change the reality of the situation? They're sort of nitpicking about this subpoena. Number one, they didn't ask Mesereau if he was subpoenaed, which is interesting. They say he said Wade wasn't subpoenaed, but they don't actually ask him. Instead, they ask Scott Ross. Scott Ross is an investigator for the defense. He's not going to be privy to whether Michael called Wade or called James. He's not going to be privy to any of that information. He's not going to know firsthand that Wade did or did not get a subpoena. It's really a minute point, and they're not even asking the right person. Why didn't they ask Mesereau in this little documentary here? Why didn't they ask him if he subpoenaed Wade? Another problem, it goes to making mountains out of molehills. Is this really changing anything? Not really.
Always start with your strongest witness. In our case, that was Wade Robson. Wade Robson had to get through 3 seasoned, experienced, intelligent attorneys. How is it that when those 3 attorneys, this was not a surprise attack, those 3 attorneys were very seasoned, experienced, 3 attorneys with cross-examination history under their belt, prosecutors, got together the night before, prepared their attack. How are they not able to break Wade Robson? you're trying to hide the truth, you're going to waver, you're going to do whatever.
And James Safechuck's claim in Leaving Neverland that Jackson pressured him to testify during the trial is provably false because he was eliminated as a witness by the judge well before the trial even began.
So here we go. We have another claim about James that, it was provably false, but they can't show us. They can't show us where it's provably false, but they're going to tell us that it's provably false. Well, where's the information? I mean, you're putting together this whole thing to expose the lies of Leaving Neverland, but you can't expose them? You can't show us where he was eliminated as a witness or what this lie is? And again, Scott Ross is the one who said that James was not contacted, but he would not know. How would he know whether Michael Jackson contacted James and his family or not? How would he know that? They don't ask Tom Mesereau. They don't ask the guy who's right there. They could ask him and get him on camera saying something. They won't do that. That's interesting to know. The other argument that they keep trying to make about Wade is, he went through 3 seasoned attorneys, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? This is not an argument. It's not an argument. He lied to his family. He lied to his own wife. He lied to his mother. That's what happened. So going through attorneys and questioning, again, not an argument. Nice try. It is something that happens a lot in propaganda where they will try to make these arguments and try to ascribe more meaning to them than what's really happened. So always look out for that. We will see more examples of that, obviously, but those are just things to keep in mind. Listen to what you're being told. Assume that it's true. Assume that what you're being told is true. Have they shown you how it's true, or are they just telling you? Does it really change anything? Do these things change the fact that Wade and James were abused? Does it really prove anything? No, it doesn't.
Leaving Neverland leaves out critical information that seriously calls Wade Robson's story into question. Robson's description of Neverland as an adult was nothing like the house of horrors he now claims it was. He gushed about how wonderful it was.
So we went to the studio where he was recording the Dangerous album at the time, and it's like 89, and with the whole family, grandparents and everybody, and just hung out for a couple hours and watched videotapes, and then he asked the whole family to come back to the ranch, his place that night, Neverland, and we ended up staying there for like a week.
That must be every kid's dream. I mean, my dream would have been to go there too.
Yeah, I mean, it's Disneyland. You know, his house we showed up, it was just the best thing in the world.
Wade asked if he and his fiancée could be married there while Michael was on trial. Turned down because it was such an inappropriate request at the time. And Robson even shot a short film at Neverland with his wife, and in the credits thanks Michael Jackson for letting him use his sacred land.
Michael Jackson is not going to be abused. Michael Jackson is not going to be slammed, is not going to be a piñata for every person who has financial motives.
Another misleading piece in the so-called documentary. A news clip of Mark Garagos, who initially represented Michael in 2003 in the criminal case, is manipulated to appear as if he's threatening an accuser after Michael's arrest.
We will land on you like a ton of bricks. We will land on you like a hammer. If you do anything to besmirch this man's reputation, anything to intrude on his privacy in any way that's actionable, we will unleash a legal torrent like you've never seen.
In fact, he was talking about a completely different legal case in which he and Michael were secretly videotaped on board a charter aircraft.
Disclosed that those 2 video cameras, which also apparently had audio on them, were surreptitiously placed in there, were recording attorney-client conversations, and then somebody had the unmitigated gall to shop those tapes around to media outlets in order to sell them to the highest bidder.
I understand the point that they're trying to make here because they're saying, well, he's talking about this other case, but they're making it sound like he'd go after all these other people. Isn't it just a bit disingenuous to not point out that the way Garagos was talking seemed to be very general, that he's talking about anybody that would go after Michael Jackson, and then he follows it up with the more specific example? I understand what they're trying to say, but to suggest that it's completely deceptive or that people didn't didn't watch that, and there would be a possibility that a victim would watch that and think to themselves, ooh, this person is intimidating. I could understand where a victim would watch that and interpret it that way. Yes, he's talking about another case. I understand that. I think there's points to be made on both sides here, but let's look at it a little bit closer. Let's say they did misrepresent this and this is horrible and egregious. Okay, fair enough. Let's say that this is something that Dan Reed should not have done. Let's agree on that for the sake of argument. Does it change the whole narrative that Michael Jackson lived the life of a pedophile, molested these two, molested many other children, paid out millions multiple times, had books of naked children, was eventually turned into a drug addict and an alcoholic? Does it change the fact that he attacked homeless people with water balloons in the middle of the night? Does it change the fact that he was an awful person who stole music from people without giving them credit? No, it doesn't change any of this. It doesn't change any of this. Mark Yargos and Tom Mesro, these guys were attack dogs. That's what they were hired to do. They were hired to attack victims, and they did so many times. Tom Mesro still attacks victims. That's what he does. This is a guy who stood up for Bill Cosby. What more evidence do you need that the guy is some of these people are just scum. I'm sorry to say. Some of these people are just scum. Yes, everybody deserves a defense, but to defend someone like Michael Jackson you gotta be on the low part of the totem pole there. You've got to have a low moral character. You basically have to be a degenerate yourself if you're going to defend someone like Michael Jackson.
Graphic sexual details, especially in Safe Chuck's story, are similar to details contained in a discredited book by Victor Gutierrez, who Michael Jackson successfully sued for $2.7 million.
Okay, they barely talk about this book, and they've done this many times. They try to make the accusation that somehow James sat down, read a book by Victor Gutierrez, and then decided to create his complaint based on this book. I mean, where's his history of being a scammer? Where is James' history of lying to many people in order to get money, for instance? Show us this history that he has, that James is this awful person. No, we're supposed to just believe that he woke up one day and decided to just turn into this monstrous character and get his complaints from a book. The idea in of itself is just dumb. And yes, there are dumb people in this world, okay? There are dumb people in this world. I call them Michael Jackson supporters. But nonetheless, there are dumb people in this world. It could very well happen that someone would do that. But the chances of it being somebody who doesn't really have a history of exhibiting this type of bad behavior is going to be pretty slim to none. Not to mention the fact that we're talking about going up against someone like Michael Jackson. Of course this stuff is going to be scrutinized and taken apart. The chances of James ever even reading this book are very small. It's not a very popular book. In fact, people only start talking about it during very specific parts of the case. So it's quite possible that James never even heard of this book. I didn't know about this book until, I don't know, it was well after 2006. It was well after that somebody started talking about this book. I wasn't even aware of it. The only people that are aware of this book are Michael Jackson fans, coincidentally enough.
Leaving Neverland never mentions that Wade Robson literally begged to get a position working with Cirque du Soleil on the Michael Jackson 1 show in Las Vegas, a job that he badly wanted prior to suing Michael's estate.
A couple of years before the show premiered, Wade sent an email to the creative team at Cirque stating, and I quote, "I always wanted to do this."
Okay, we've got to read this because they, of course, take all of this stuff out of context. Francois, whichever way this goes, this is a long overdue call. My first mistake was that I imagined I had the capacity to give all of myself to the MJ Cirque show, directing my first film and being a brand new father. I always wanted to do this MJ show badly. But then when I needed to come to that Montreal meeting